Hi, this is Brett Cenkus. I'm a business lawyer and an M&A advisor. So M&A is mergers and acquisitions. And as a lawyer and as an advisor, I do a lot of work in this space. So businesses buying and selling each other. So I help them with the legal side and also help sellers market and sell their businesses. Terms that come up commonly in M&A are EBITDA and seller discretionary earnings. And these terms aren't restricted. Well, seller discretionary earnings really is an M&A term, but EBITDA shows up in other places. It shows up in finance and things like that. But in M&A, these are really important terms. So EBITDA, EBITDA, is an acronym, and it stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So it's the net earnings of a business, adding back in the interest the business paid on loans, the taxes the business paid, the depreciation that reduced its income. So depreciation to assets is an accounting term, accounting construct, calculation that reduces earnings, and then amortization, which is similar to depreciation. Depreciation is on sort of hard assets. So if you buy a huge piece of equipment for your business, you might depreciate it over time. You write that off. You reduce your earnings because the asset is losing value over time. Could be a couple years, could be 15 years. And amortization is on intangible assets like goodwill and other things like that. So we add all these things back in. So if a business makes $1 million in net earnings, but they had $100,000 paid $100,000 in interest, they paid $200,000 in taxes, that's $300,000, and then they had $100,000 of depreciation and amortization. We add that back in. That's a total add backs of $400,000. So EBITDA is $1.4 million. Seller discretionary earnings is a similar idea, but it shows up it doesn't show up in finance. It shows up in mergers and acquisitions or just business brokerage in the Main Street part of the market, which I define as less than $2 million. So businesses that are trading hands for less than $2 million. And it's similar to EBITDA. We're adding certain things back in, but it's seller discretionary earnings or SDE. Actually, other words you might hear for it are recast earnings or owner's benefit or adjusted earnings. All mean the same thing. And what we're doing is we're adding back in a couple other things. We're adding back in the compensation of the owner-operators. In small businesses, owners tend to take money out of their business in a lot of different ways. I mean, some will pay themselves some salary, some will have distributions. There's all sorts of things going on. And we're adding that back in because the idea is that owner-operator, what they take out of the business, how they pay themselves can be wildly different in small businesses. Some take hardly anything out. They're building everything up in terms of building the worth of their business. Some suck it all out every year, right? So we're trying to sort of normalize for unique decisions of different owners. And then we add back in discretionary expenses, things that an owner might run through the business that are defensible, that you can deduct as a necessary business expense that really aren't really necessary. So maybe certain travel, certain entertainment, certain dues, professional dues, research periodicals, stuff like that. Maybe it's home office, it's things like that. Totally necessary, but it isn't really something that you need necessarily to run the business or that a new owner would need. And one-time expenses we would also put back in to say, hey, that was a one-off. There was a crazy litigation matter last year. That's not going to happen again. There's no history of that. We're going to add that back in. Here's what we're doing. Okay, so that's what these things are, EBITDA and SDE. Why do they exist? They exist so that people looking at the business from an investment or a purchase standpoint can compare apples and apples, one business to another. So there can be two exactly similar businesses. Exactly the same revenue, same industry, same type of customer, same net earnings, but one business is highly levered, it has tons and tons of loans, and the other business has none. Well, so the net earnings of the one with a lot of loans is going to be way down here, right? It's going to be it's going to be a lot less than the other business. But from a buyer's perspective, that's the same business because most buyers are going to require all the debt be paid off at closing. So in the hands of the new buyer, those are identical businesses. They're not in the existing hands of the sellers, but we're trying to normalize. We're trying to get apples and apples comparisons. So with SDE, the reason you put back in those one-time charges is what you're trying to say is, look, that's not normal. We're trying to give you an idea, new buyer, of what this business will produce for you next year. And here's why we think you shouldn't count that thing. and here's why we're going to add back in the owner's salaries, because those two businesses are exactly the same, but this owner is letting a lot of money build up, and this owner's taking it all out. Well, what do you care? I mean, they both produce the same amount of really, truly the same amount of SDE. So that's why we use these terms in the industry. That's what they mean. If you have questions about EBITDA or SDE or anything about mergers and acquisitions, reach out to me. Thanks.
So long, comes to the human being, so white lies.